all kind of funky white there, crustiness, but I am pretty sure that this engine was so messed up with the adjustments, it wasn't even funny. Somebody swapped this motor or something. I don't know if it's a 2.2 now or 2.5. I guess I got to measure the bore. I heard different things. But that's 60 pounds of pressure in the front cylinder here. Somebody had the head gasket off. As you can see, that was a Felpro gasket. And when I look at this guy, come on, light. Okay, like when you see this valve is closed. Kind of looks even, and then this one here, it doesn't look like it's fitting the shape properly. So I think it's not seating. It's hard to tell though. There's that white crusty stuff right there, like it's making an improper burn. You know, as you can see that all the valves are white, these three. I got over 120 to 140, something like that, in these cylinders. It had a fair amount of blow-by, but somebody left the PCV valve off, so it was hard to really tell. And after I got it running better, it was a big difference. And it was just, you know, there was even oil in the intake manifold here. See, well, this was catching oil. So, I mean, that actually could be gas, but it's hard to say, you know, definitively. But without a PCV valve, it really puts a damper on the engine. You just hope like the rear main seal didn't get messed up. Of course, that would require pulling out the transmission, but it doesn't look like it's leaking. But it very well could have. Also, the timing was like so retarded, and the idle was really, really high. So, you know, when you have something like that where the idle is really high, the timing is way off, the base idle, yeah, well, the base idle was way up. That was the reason why the idle was high. Among other things, the starter never sounded so good. It kept clicking on me. So this is the time to do it because it's under the intake and exhaust. But I just worry about this piston having a hole in it. But I think I would have had like even more blow-by because it ran fairly well. You know, when all was said and done. Yeah, that could have maybe come up when I took it off. I would have to say that's not cracked. So I think it's kind of okay. I can lower the, spin the motor over and, what do you call it? I can spin the motor over and look at the cylinder walls too now. It's going to throw off the timing belt because I kind of set it up. The timing belt is like this, but I can keep it taut and turn it. But in the end, I can just. The intermediate shaft really wasn't on right because it was off by a tooth because usually these distributors are perfectly flat in the front. And this is after I adjusted the timing properly. It was off to the side a little bit. So, and somebody really, they kind of did over tighten this belt. There's a groove here. I'm not even sure if they, they never did the tensioner pulley. That's got to be fucked up. They never did the tensioner pulley. I don't even think they did the water pump, to be honest. So, I'm hard pressed to believe that right now. This guy out of the way. What do we got here? No, that water pump was never done. Supposedly this is a rebuilt engine. And the pan gasket looks like it was changed. And it's all squeezing out from all ends when I was under there cutting the exhaust bolts. Yeah, so this is looking like it is the valves not seating, but nobody ever did anything. They swapped the used motor and just slapped it together. Yeah, the belt is new. Like I said, they over-tightened it, or there's so much. Look at that tensioner pulley. It's older than dirt. Yeah. I don't know if you can hear that. I can. I had my sweaty phone turned off. Inside this cylinder, kind of can still see the crosshatch pattern. Over here, not so much. I mean, it kind of looks like You got some lines up here. Who knows if somebody just changed the rings on this motor? Yeah, it's rebuilt, and you know they did it maybe. 'Cause it's funny how this one you can't see any crosshatch pattern really. I mean, it does have blow by, you know. So probably going to consume oil to some degree. I don't know how much. You just really don't, because we don't know the history of the car. But there's no like major scores, you know. So, and the head does look bad. It's just that by the time you're done getting the head rebuilt and doing all this, you know, what do you do? You know, and if I'm wrong about the head, if I'm wrong about the head, then there is something wrong with the lower half. So I gather I got to get it checked out, no matter what. But something does look off with it, but hard to say. Yeah, you can kind of see this, like air was going this way. Interesting. This is the exhaust valve. This exhaust valve is cracked. Hard to tell. I don't think so. Hopefully no wiped out cam lobes. Yeah, weird pattern, huh? I guess that's kind of normal, the rollers. Rollers are there. Oh. I gotta measure the cylinder and see what diameter it is, because there was something to the fact that it was a different engine. I gotta find my caliper. Alright, starting to put the accessories on. I'm just gonna put them all on in one shot. Got the new gasket right there. This is all cleaned off. Okay, may not look like it, but look what I did. I changed the starter because it clicked on me a couple of times once I got it hot, and I forgot about this. And of course, I had to pay more locally. Only Clearway was able to, Parts Authority. But if you notice, this doesn't have that heat shield on it, and I think that's part of the reason why they get lost, you know, in time, or they give it back with the rebuilder, and the rebuilder doesn't put one on, or something along those lines. I'm not quite sure how that ends up working out, but I'm pretty sure this would be worth it. But as you can see, the starter is under the intake manifold. I mean, it's meant to be changed, but it's like, it's way easier to do it like this, and I just felt it was a no-brainer. But, you know, it would have been like $70 somewhere else, and it was like, it was $123, but I get back $23, so it's like $100 worth of tax. So I paid $123. I'm going to get $23 back for the core, and I'm going to pick up the head bolts tomorrow. They couldn't get that yesterday, and obviously I got to do a whole timing belt and everything. But the only other problem is the intake manifold set. Although it's a good quality one, they only have one of these, and I'm not even sure this is an exhaust gasket. These look more like exhaust gaskets, but they're not really right. So what I'm thinking is that this is 86, the intake and the exhaust, and they what do you call it? They just changed the valve cover. So there's some gaskets that don't, you know, they're not going to interchange. They change these little pipes from year to year. Even though they have this one that looks like it, but I'm wondering if it's for something else because it's a little different material, you know, but it fits perfectly. But if I got the 86 one, it shows it had that style, but it didn't have something else though. So it's kind of weird. It's like a mix match of parts. So, and really it's only this brand. If I had bought a different brand, because I put something that got shipped all together, you know, and it's a good brand, but for some reason they don't have certain things right. Like I don't even know what these two are, you know, even for the 91 engine. But you know, I was going by what the guy was saying, and I knew that there were things that were, you know, 91 to 95 ish, or 80 or whatever it is. It's like 89 to 95, but it really wasn't 100% correct in this kit. This particular brand, if I bought a Felpro brand, it would have had they just put all the gaskets in, which makes sense. That way, you know, God forbid if you had anything, you know, switched around, it would cover it, you know. So I gotta find these gaskets, and I kind of don't trust this one because I expect it to be one of these guys. It's a better material, but you know, obviously the same length as this. So I have a part number. I'm going to ask Parts Authority tomorrow. Oh yeah, the other thing is I fucked up on the on this guy. I should have ordered it for the 86. This is the oxygen sensor, and the oxygen sensor we bought. Unfortunately, I got it dirty. The oxygen sensor we bought is for the 91, so they went with a four wire one. So that's something I should have figured out, and I didn't, unfortunately. So, oh well. So I got to get an oxygen sensor, and we got to return that one, and I got to get these two little gaskets. So the head bolts were 30. Like I said, they were like 22 online plus shipping. So I just said, oh, let me get them locally, and then I realized, I'm like, oh fuck, that's right, the starter. So I did this. I got the starter from them because they were able to get it for me on Saturday. I should be able to pick up the head bolts tomorrow. However, and I said I got this together for the most part, but I'm actually what do you call it? It's not, you know, I don't have the O2 sensor and these two gaskets, and to do this on the car after I put this in is a real pain. So I'm gonna wait till I get those. Hopefully they can get them the same day tomorrow, and hopefully it's not too much more money as far as the oxygen sensor is concerned. But it's still like $20 plus shipping online. So it's a one wire. It should only be about $30, but we'll see. So I just got this old school KD tools. As you can tell, this is the old school one, not the one made in China. This is the one that you know, redoes the spark plug thread, but it's the wide spark plug thread. So there were some engines that had an 18 millimeter by 1.5 thread. So this was stripped because I took it out, and that wasn't an issue really. And it seemed like, you know, there was nothing wrong with the threads of the original one, really. You know, so somebody just had it hanging in by a thread, by literally by a thread. And when I put the new one in, it fucked up the threads a little bit, but it should be okay. But basically, I went to go make sure it was tight, and it just stripped. So after using this tool that starts small and goes big, I should clean out the threads and retap them so it goes in the original position. And then this guy goes here because the spark plug thread, the old school spark plug thread, is the same thread as an oxygen sensor. So they sell, you know, they sell these things for an oxygen sensor, but they're a lot more expensive. And the ones that are cheaper are definitely Chinese made. At least this one I know was a very high quality one. It cut really nice, so I was very happy about that. So I'm going to put red Loctite on the outside here. Although I'm not sure if I should. I should maybe just better off holding it with rust. Now that I think about it, maybe I'll only put it on the tippy top here. Because I don't know how much the red is going to hold, but it actually has to be grounded in order to work. So you don't want to interfere with the threads, you know, too much. Same thing when you put a sleeve in for the spark plugs. You know, I gather because of the bindage, it'll work. You know, it's either that I'll put it here and not put it over here. You know, I got to think about it first. You know, so that's that. And I had to clean up the threads on this because it was sitting for a long time and there was rust on the outside of the threads. Like the rest of these, you know, not a big deal. Very high quality though. It actually went in. That's the old school KD spark plug rethreader that I'm using for to rethread an oxygen sensor, because the head can't go on until that's right. I had other problems with this, so this thing here, well, at least this will definitely hold. And like I said, I might just put it in dry, maybe a little bit of oil just to start it, and put a little bit of anti-seize lubricant just on this, because that's more important, that it comes out and still conducts, the ground. And we shall see how well it goes in. So I decided to screw it most of the way in, oops, and put the drop on there. And then when I tighten it up, it should be, have something to hold there. I'll put more anti-seize on the inside part. And that you can see it's capillary action going around and going right in with my finger. And it should seat, as well as the oxygen sensor should seat. Everything worked out good. I used the oxygen sensor socket. I put a bunch of anti-seize in the inside, and I used the 1-inch wrench. That's how I stripped it to begin with, by the way. If I used that by itself, I might have not stripped it, but it might have, just blown out in due time, and this would have been a lot harder. It's always better to, nip it in the butt, because basically a lot of guys, what they won't do, they get scared with this type of stuff, where if it has a gasket on it, you're supposed to compress the gasket, just like if it was a spark plug. I see many spark plugs, because if it's not a Chevy with the tapered spark plug socket, they end up, just, trying to, they end up trying to just barely put in a spark plug, and the next thing you know, the spark plug is loose, because they don't actually compress the washer. When you have a washer, you're supposed to compress it. That's what makes the positive seal. So, when it bottoms out, it's enough. So that's why I do it with the big wrench. I don't wring it down. I'm just giving myself the feel, when I'm going around with the wrench. When I'm going around with the bigger wrench, I right away it's compressed. Again, this is not to put it really, really hard, but you got to get a feel of when that washer is compressed. That's the only thing that makes sense. So yeah, leaving something like that loose ain't gonna help you, and it'll especially with an oxygen sensor where it's getting information and it needs to be grounded. It can get a little flaky information into the computer. So, or may get flaky information at certain RPMs or whatever. So this is the right, at flaky RPMs. Basically, at higher RPMs or lower RPMs, there may not be a sweet spot, all the time. Maybe only one set of sweet spots. But now it's ready to go in this head, and I got the new gasket on the pipe over here, and I got new hardware. Got the starter in. I got to put this guy in, which the machine shop took off so they could mill it. They had welded this head up. This was all inside here was all rotted, and it was barely contacting, and so compression was seemingly leaking out the side. I hope there's nothing else wrong. I don't see anything wrong with the cylinder. I had cleaned it up. I filled it with oil. It did, alleviate, but not immediately. So, there was no major problems with the crosshatch patterns and stuff like that. It seemed all right. There might be high mileage on the motor. It may have some blow by, but initially this engine didn't even have a PVC valve hooked up to it. It was just there with no vacuum line. So this caused a whole bunch of issues and kind of, weirdness. So, I don't want to sound negative, but in the end, I hate to do all this work and there's a problem, but there could be, because you really can't test the block. You can only give it a visual. And like I said, there's really no, can I put a, there's no cracks in here. They all look very similar. I cleaned off all the carbon, unless there's something unforeseen. I cleaned out this hole here with drill bits. These two were free. This one was not. Who knows where the compression was going at this point? But that's why I had the whole head rebuilt, to be sure. Worst case scenario, the nice new head can go on on another block, but we're not hoping for that. There's too many things that said that this gasket was messed up, even though it was a Fel-Pro gasket. Yeah, this is the #1 cylinder. A lot of weird stuff going here, and that's why I felt like the compression was leaking sideways, you know. And the head very well was warped. He said it was like more than like it was at least 7 thousandths, but even for him, he said it was kind of like all over the place. But the head there was no aluminum right here. That's why he welded this up and then machined it. You know, that's why it doesn't quite look like the others, you know, but there's enough now. But like I said, these holes were clogged between, but it was kind of weird looking, you know, to say the least. These had compression. This one had 60 pounds. So I assumed this one would have 60 pounds, and it didn't. It had full compression. So there's really, to lose half the compression in the engine, it made me feel like there's something wrong here. Now, there's always a chance that, even though I initially looked at it, the timing belt seemed like it was on right, but then again, all the cylinders would be off. It was too low of compression to not be something going on here, you know, because the head just like, and the thing is, it's very possible, because I didn't go crazy testing it because I had no, you know, dirty antifreeze, so I didn't think it was in the head. I really thought it was the block. I was really hoping him to say that, oh yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong here, but he said there's so many issues with this head, it's kind of hard not to rule it out. So, you know, and it was mismatched parts, and oh god, it was so many, like the head in the block is up to 91, and they said they had the head removed, and I didn't kind of believe it, but then I saw the new head gasket, but you know, just simply not being cleaned and whatnot could definitely make a difference, you know. But I really wasn't getting any overheat. But it's possible after driving it for several minutes or, you know, whatever, an hour, it could start to give a problem, you know. And he did mention that there was a heat problem, which I didn't check the heat, but it wasn't overheating at all. So it's very possible it starts to leak into the combustion chamber and then doesn't. And the thing is like when you drive it, it doesn't feel right at idle, and then you start driving it, it seems fine. So it's possible it builds up because it's able to build up past this problem. So there's always unforeseen things. It's not always cut and dry, but there was no cracks in the head. He, you know, everything was pressure tested and they vacuum tested, and he has the ability to weld any cracks, and there was no cracks. But he did do the valve job, you know. So I was happy that it was all done, you know. And we shall see, you know, because it didn't make quite that much sense, other than leaking out sideways. You know, there was a weird sound coming from the catalytic converter, which was somebody eliminated a pipe coming out of the catalytic converter, which I welded properly, so it stopped, you know, farting basically. And you know, we'll see. You know, I really don't know. This is one of those things that it's just weird, you know, and it could be that it's leaking compression at different times, you know, but I can't see rings giving that much of an issue without massive, you know, smoke out the tailpipe. I can't see it, you know, so we shall see. This is why I really didn't give that much of a video here, because I thought this was just going to be a motor job that I would be filming, and it ends up being I pulled ahead. There was so many issues with the vacuum lines. Came to me with so many vacuum lines off. It was so hard to tell. They totally eliminated the PCV system. I don't know. You know, this is just like, you know, so many hands were on it that we're not sure. And he bought it not really knowing. And I got a little input from someone that was a former owner, and it really wasn't comforting. You know, because they said they changed the engine, they put a rebuilt engine. It's not a rebuilt engine. They totally screwed him. They saw him coming. So I don't know where they got the information, you know, where he got the information from. So I got new head bolts. I mean, the old ones, you know, may have been changed at one time, but it really did not look like it. Um, these were the head bolts. Let me put my reading glasses on. Just as 11 millimeter. Don't know if the new Felpro head gasket head bolts will say the same thing. They don't look bad, so it's possible they changed them. But it's kind of hard to torque ahead when you don't have it surfaced right, you know. So it was definitely not milled before. Because, like I said, the gasket was barely hanging on here. There was barely a ring right here, and this was all corroded. There was nothing left. So you know, similar to this, but this is not really an issue. You know, see how that is, and you see how this is. I guess it's within reason here, because the guy didn't want to sit there and totally start messing with the you know, first of all, keep welding it up and then milling it off is doable, but he's probably seen worse, and that's why it ended up being like this. As you can see, uh, this is just barely gotten with the milling machine, so it's possible he actually welded that too, and that's why it's discolored, but it's all smooth now from the milling job. So we shall see, because I'm not 100% sure. I remember these heads you can mill as far as that, so I kind of wish he went more. But there's so much. There's only so much you can do before it's like this is not the problem, because he didn't really see that much problem other than warpedness and this being so rotted, and it was right up against the gasket. Like I said, I didn't have overheating problems, but it's very possible there's a certain amount of allowance for that. Like, I didn't know, because the guy told me afterwards. He said, "Hey, can you check the heat, because the heat was not working?" I go, that makes a lot more sense. But the fan was coming on. It seemed like everything was hot. The air coming out. So, this is just a video. I thought I was just going to do a little bit, but I ended up now deciding to go further. So we'll see when I get this running. I usually take off the head and the intake together on this, because these bolts are a real pain in the neck to try to do on the car. You put a new gasket, which wasn't changed, and the bolts may have been changed at one time. I'm not sure. A lot of brackets got to come off this and stuff, and there was mismatched parts. Like I said, like, this gasket doesn't look bad. It looks like somebody had it off recently, but this is not really an 86 gasket. This is for aluminum, this valve cover, which is similar to the turbo one, which it's not a turbo. So I guess I can look at some numbers here to see what year the actual motor is. But the brand that I had gotten, the Apex brand head gasket kit, it had some gaskets here, but it didn't have all of them. And it ends up being, this is an 86, and this is obviously 86. I had ordered the wrong thing, because I got everything for a 91 Dodge Daytona, when this is really for an 86. So these gaskets were exclusive to 86, so I had to buy those separate. And so far so good. Yeah, there's some differences, but well, I'll figure it out. Like I said, I got to screw in that part to get this guy on, and find a new clamp for that. But so far so good. So hopefully this will help somebody. I will probably show more of this running, and I have other things to do: timing belts, water pump, because that's just it. They did a head and they didn't do that. They didn't do the water pump. It's definitely not been changed recently, I should say. All I can tell that there's, first of all, there was somebody over tightened the timing belt, because there's a line on here. I used to see that all the time. This has the rounded timing belt, so it's definitely the newer engine from 87 and up, or 89 and up. And I could tell by looking down there that is the old um, timing belt tensioner right there. It's kind of like pitted so much. So there's a lot going on here. There's some oily kind of crap here. This is all oily and crappy. And I did spray a lot here and clean off and blah blah blah. But it's there's definitely a few problems, that was unattended to, and this is why I get these cars, because when a lot of people touch them that don't know what they're doing, I still have to kind of start from scratch, because I'm not sure
where they left off. Even though I did a compression test before, I'm like 60 pounds. I put oil in it, it went up 5 pounds. You would think it would go up a lot more if it was rings. So it made me feel it was the head. So that's why I pulled on the head. But I didn't, he didn't find that much wrong. Um, but we did everything. We did the valve stem seals. And the milling, and the welding. So hopefully this all works. Like I said, worst case scenario, I have confidence in the head being rebuilt and go in the block. But it doesn't make any sense, Like I don't have the. Actually, I can do this now. I can rotate the engine down. So those are not bad. Like I said, those have a lot of compression. This was kind of weird. I know it looks funny. At times I had oil in here, and there's no like big gouges. It may not be like you know uh, super duper, but it's similar to the other ones. There's no ridge at all. The oil did go down when I filled it with oil and penetrating oil, but it took like after an hour. It didn't like just pour right out. There's no reason to lose half the compression. So it's very possible that despite what he found, and he didn't even realize that there was, uh, compression leaking at the valve at certain times. It's very possible once you get it on the bench and you take everything off and stuff, testing it, it's not a problem because you've moved the valve. Could have been hanging on a little bit. So it's unfortunate. You like to see like major problems. Like I like to see when the valve melts and it becomes a heart shape. But it's possible the timing is off and it just affected the front cylinder more than the rest of them. I didn't get that. I did look at the marks. It looked like they were on. I did my best that I could with that. Because there was it's get right at zero over here. When I put it at zero, the top seemed to be correct. So I don't think it's that. And the car ran relatively well. Sideways and difference between feet and stuff can change that. I'm not sure if I was a hot engine. I thought it was pretty hot, but it was after I did some work. So heat can make a big difference when it comes to head gasket expansion and when you have this issue. I don't know if I took pictures before. I don't know if I can include them in there into this video. I'm not sure if I erased them. But ultimately, like I said, worst case scenario is better we did on another motor. I really don't see anything physically wrong here. I really don't. There's not a lot of evidence of that. There's no real reason at 60 pounds of pressure other than head gasket. And if it was going anywhere, I'm not sure. Or I simply just didn't run it long enough, and maybe it kind of sealed itself. No matter what I did, I only got 50 pounds. So like I said, every time I talk it out loud, it just still doesn't make sense to me. Like I feel like you have something, making make sense. Like I said, those two ports on the block, well, there's only one port. And there's two ports on the gasket. Goes in this way. I actually used a drill bit once I found out the right drill bit because these were free, and this one was loaded with a bunch of crap. So that's supposed to make the cylinder cooler by like 75 degrees or something like that. To get a combustion, it could be like 2,000 degrees. The EGR valve is also not connected. So this is something else that I'm going to do. It's it's funny. This thing is not in the right direction, and I don't know if I have to blow out the. I did already actually, so I should be good. But the EGR valve tube goes here, and there's no EGR valve, and I don't know exactly what drives it. But I'm gonna put, there is a gasket there, but who knows if something else is wrong with this thing that they made. I'm gonna take that off. Like this stud here. I'm gonna take a look at that before I put this on, because something is up there. It's very possible because this is the cylinder. I wonder if there's some kind of vacuum leak because this makeshift thing was not done right, and it's actually leaking. It's the reason why it might be leaking into the EGR. You know, it's not something I checked, but in the end, I was happy to do all this because this is definitely there was nothing left here. It was barely hanging on by a thread. So it's very possible the whole EGR thing was actually doing that because maybe that thing is all warped. It's not really right. Ultimately, I would be taking the intake. If I forget which one is the round hole, probably the exhaust. But I'm going to check that. I have a new EGR gasket. Who knows what they did with it? And it very well could be leaking, you know, between the cylinders somehow. So that'll be the next step before I put the head on, along with putting that guy on and the sensors back in. So we'll figure this out. All right, this is the Apex brand head gasket. I really like it. It's nice graphite. It's very durable. Has the copper pieces put in there, which I really like, which are on the four corners. I guess I'm almost wondering if they know it leaks out the head gasket that way, because it's funny how the other ones don't have it except for the ends here. You know, I guess each one protects itself from going between the cylinders. The oil drain back hole's got the copper on them, you know, and the oil fill. So that's all good stuff. This protects each side, and because you have the end ones there, that's how they leak out. I bet you there's complaints about the head gaskets leaking out sideways now that I'm looking at it. So this is all good stuff. So that guy's gonna go on. I cleaned the surface already with brake cleaner. I cleaned this surface already as well because it was machined, even though it looks clean. You rub it and you get black shit. So got this guy in there with liquid Teflon. I'm not gonna put this guy on. I'm not gonna bother with the piece, the big thing here, because it kind of gets in the way. Yeah, it's gonna save me some time if I do it that way, but it's not impossible. You know, it's not like it's on this side, it's on that side. You get your hand in there. So, all right, now I got to lift this guy on there. A few seconds. I try to lay it in the exhaust first and kind of pivot it down. And when I pivot it down, the head kind of rests on top of the pins. I don't think you're really scratching up the surface too much, but you know, you're gentle. You move it around, boom, goes right into the pins. Pretty flat. I never checked that. I am going to check that though now. I wonder if there's a crack in between on that intake. That would be horrible. So I'm going to do that first and see what happens. So basically, if you put air here, it's actually, I could feel the air. I had two hands using it. It's coming right from behind here. There's a little bump out here. I guess this is separate. I'm not sure where that's going yet, but it's in the general area, which it should be. It shouldn't be only, you know, fouling out one cylinder if what I said was true. I doubt it's blocked. I cleaned this up because it had some dirt in there. However, this guy here didn't look so great, you know, and I'm like, I gather it's straight enough, but it's like, you know, this oily shit, you can see it past the gasket here, you know, so it could be an issue, you know. I think it'd be best to put like silicone on this, since this is not like really, oh, there it goes. It wasn't coming off at first. Yeah, when you see the oil like this, and granted there was oil, you know, in this area here, which is not where it was, you know, that's not going to the EGR, but the PCV valve system wasn't working, so this thing was getting saturated with oil. It's very possible this is just porous, you know, but I'm not sure in what sense, you know. So again, it's most likely leaking out the side. Like I said, with the head gasket with the copper rings on here, it's actually pretty smart. So we'll see. I'm going to put the new guy on here for sure and clean this up. I'm debating whether it should be straightened out to some sort, but it's a graphite gasket. It really should make up for it. You know, it doesn't seem to be terribly, you know, out of whack. You know, it's bolted down. So I'll see about the silicone part and take it from there. So I got my handy dandy homemade milling machine, which is kind of dull, but I've been going at it for a while, and you can see how warped, you know, like how many imperfections there are in this. You know, I'm really debating whether I should just, you know, get an EGR valve. I really think I'm finished debating, but maybe I should get an EGR valve and actually make it work the way it's supposed to. Because the guy who designed the car knows more about cars than me or you. So if you fuck with his idea, you actually telling them that you know more. But not only that, you could do it.
you know, a lot of times you can do it, but there are consequences. And if it's consequences you don't want when you're trying to finish something off, it's probably best to give yourself no consequences, you know, or very little. So there's that other piece that goes in the car that's creating a vacuum leak because there's a vacuum line that goes in the car, but it's not for the heating system. It's for something else. So I don't know if there's some other air, you know, vacuum operated thing, but it's under the dashboard on this side. It's possible that's just for the, you know, it probably is for the HVAC, for the like the recirculate door or something like that. That's the only thing I can think of. So I think I'm going to lean towards that because it's probably better off. There's less headache then, and you know, I don't know. I'll take it from there, but I'm going to start putting this back together. A little tip: I did the 45, said torque to 45, and then torque to 65, and then torque to 65 again. The problem is it's not always right, and plus, you know, there is a little bit of an impact because I have this extra weight over here, which is really not a problem to do, but you got to use your brain when you're doing this. So basically, when I was going around, I basically went around 65 pounds about 8 times because in the end, every time I tightened them, you know, in a sequence, this one here did like a double click. Like it moved and it clicked on the torque wrench. So I didn't trust it. And then as I got this one to stop making noise, this one started making noise. So then I did that one. So basically it's binding and not getting fully tight. So when you do your 90-degree final turn, it may not be right in the end. It's probably not going to be off by a lot. And the way the guys used to do these heads, they used to leave everything hooked up, disconnect the head, slide out the gasket, and slide the new one in, and maybe run a rag under there. But that's how bad these cars were treated because they was just into making money. That being said, uh, it's also good to even like wait, let the gasket settle. If I put a little bit of I put PB Blaster on the bolts here because you want them to glide. You should really use motor oil. It's fine though. Again, I know what I'm doing, so I'd rather go around several times and accomplish what I was talking about. So I'm gonna do this one-handed. I don't know if it's gonna work really well. Okay, so that one's gonna click. I don't anticipate any of these really being an issue. This one here was an issue, but see, it's clicking just fine. Because in the end, it's always gonna be a solid click like that. If it moves, you got to go around again before you make your final pass. Right here, this guy here, it's sat a few minutes now. Oh, see, that's good. See, that's what I expected though, because the last 2 times I torqued it, it didn't do that, but it was like a double click. So I knew it was still moving and it wasn't seated all the way. So it's kind of a false sense of, you know, what's tight. Because these torque to yield bolts, I think, are fucking garbage. But I don't care what they say, you know. If you use a better bolt and you torque it more, it's gonna hold, you know. So I just feel that it, you know, people go, oh, I understand the thing. I don't. I understand it to a degree, but you know, I just think in the end they have a failure rate, you know. And you know, maybe it's for stupid people who are gonna over torque it and rip the threads out of the block. I get it in that case, but other than that, it's like, you know, they were doing it for so many years without torque to yield bolts, and now they do this stuff. That being said, I did say that the guy who engineered this car knows more about cars than me or you, so I don't want to take his idea and mess with it. Of course, ARP probably sells head bolts for everything, or head studs, where they basically tell you to torque it even more, and there is no torque to yield anything. You reuse them. These you got to throw away every time. Granted, they were cheap, you know, so it is what it is. You know. But yeah, so that's a little trick I've learned. Keep going around. So now I'm going to do my 45. Then I'm going to start, I'm going to put the front timing gear back on with an impact gun because it's fine. Because I probably could have done it on the car. I mean, on the you know, cardboard box, bench, whatever you want to call it. But in the end, it's not a big deal. This ain't going nowhere. It's just got to be tight enough. Keyway holds it. It's really kind of silly how much they make you go through. The torque is 65 foot-pounds, and you can't even hold it. There's no, like at least modern motors, they have a hex here. You know, this is that a flat spot? Yeah, if there's a flat spot on this side, there's not a flat spot on the other side. So, yeah, there's none. So it's always a pain in the neck, and what I'm going to do, hold it with a vice grip. So in the end, it's fine. I use my electric impact with the proper socket and a swivel works every time. It's not going to hurt anything. This is not an interference engine. I'm not worried about it hitting the valves. Don't even know where the fuck this guy is right now, so that's a little bit concerning. But like I said, it's a non-interference engine. It's not going to be an issue. Yeah, this is off by 90 degrees. So you always want to, you really kind of want to put it on the right way, just in case. And also, most people don't know if it's an interference motor or not. So I did the block in the right place, and I moved the number one cylinder up. But ultimately, that would really suck if you bent something like that because you didn't pay attention. But it'd be nice if the machinist put it in the right place. But not everything is always exactly the way you want it, and it's your responsibility because you're putting in the engine to do that. But if you make YouTube videos, you might forget. But that's not going to be an issue. Yeah. So what does that mean? That means that the exhaust valve was open and the valve is up, so it's not terribly in the wrong place. But there's a deep dish in these pistons anyway. I'm not, like I said, I'm not worried about that. So, but it's a good practice to make sure it's in the right place. If I put the gear on first, I would have figured that out and done it. But they say haste makes waste. But also the head probably wouldn't have fit so square on here. It literally did not move. Like, it's not like I was torquing the bolts in and I felt, resistance or anything like that. So again, lesson learned. You shouldn't do it. But all right, just had to add that in there. So this bolt is 65 foot-pounds. I said, let me do it the right way. So basically, I held it with a rubber oil filter wrench, that doesn't hurt it. And just in case, I put that guy in the hole there, and I wedged it on the bolt without damaging the valve cover surface. And maybe a little bit. But, you can devise something else if you want. You can also just put the timing belt on when you do everything and then tighten it at the end there, because the belt is going to hold it to some degree. You have the spark plugs in. You can hold the crankshaft at that point. Do you stretch the belt? It's hard to say, but probably not. I still usually just impact it because most of the time you can't even get to it otherwise, or it's basically this situation, or you don't have the valve cover off. We can hold the camshaft. Ultimately, it'd be best to hold the camshaft, but there's nothing to hold it with. So other than putting a vice grip on it and flaking off pieces of metal in the motor, so at least I did it kind of right. So that's not so bad. All right. Torquing, and no, I did not use an angle torque gauge. Okay, but now I decided to film it to show you something. I did the first one, came out good. This second one back here, okay, make sure the camera's right. That second one there, clunk, clunk, but you can feel when it's done. You have to really use your judgment because this is really not a perfect science. So basically, I put it to a place, I know where I'm going here. That's the one that originally gave me a problem. You see how much that clicked? I'm going to go on it more and see. Wow. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to that. But you know what? When it does that, it means it's not right. So you got to go more, So this one here, that one did a little bit more. So I went around a little more. But you can't go anymore when that happens. So that one's right. I mean, that one did a little, and I was able to go more. Like I said, the bolts are not going to go, and they're new bolts, so they're not going to. See, this is another one that originally gave me a headache. Basically didn't feel right. And in the end, if I can't keep going, that was good. I'll leave it alone then. You can't touch. You can't trust that. Really, what it comes down to. Okay, I'm going to start from the first one. See, really doesn't go any further. Doesn't go any further. This one, I feel it will. Wow. Nope.
Nope. Nope. Oh my God, I don't like that. That one went a little more. That one. That one. Now, I'm going to wait. Okay, because like I said, they're only going to torque so much. It's, I don't know why it does that, but every so often you'll get that with certain cars. But it doesn't usually keep going like that. It usually figures it out, and that's it. I don't want to rip the bolts out of the lock either, because that's a real possibility. But I don't like it when it does that. And there's plenty of oil where I needed to have oil, so I feel that it's just fatigued threads in the block, perhaps. It could be imperfections on the new bolts that are just giving a certain amount of resistance. Obviously, I don't want to keep going. It's a lot that I went. This shouldn't have been that much, but in the end, I could loosen all the bolts and redo it again, but that takes away from reusing these. You know what? See, now that's a lot better. So another thing you could do is just wait. You do your 90-degree torque, wait 10 minutes, and then redo it. What I did was fine, because it's not gonna. See, that one's right now. That one, more. I don't trust that whole 90-degree torque thing. It's too arbitrary. That's why I don't like these bolts. Because if that was a torque spec that was higher with better bolts, it would keep tightening until it was right, and you would know like there was something wrong with the gasket, it wasn't sitting right, or something like that. So it's always a tricky thing, but I don't like it when it does that, because I worry about antifreeze getting through. I worry about a lot of stuff like that. So I'd rather give it a little extra tug. It's not going to go if it's a problem. So yeah, I moved out a lot more than I would like to have. I could loosen those two bolts perhaps. Maybe I should have cleaned up the threads more. Maybe I should have used regular motor oil. These are all things, it's a judgment call. But if you have experience, I have a lot of experience with this. It doesn't usually do that, but again, there's a number of factors involved. But I'd rather do it the way I've done it than just give up and let it make all that noise the whole time I made the 90-degree turn. Because to me, it's not accurate, And the difference would have been is if I had a torque at the 85 foot-pounds, it would have kept clicking until it was tight. You know what I mean? So it's very peculiar. Because obviously, if it's not tight, it's not torqued properly. Then in the end, it's got to hold it. It's got to be tight. And I never understood this shit. And especially these things used to blow head. The same car used to blow head gaskets every year. Now a lot of people didn't mill them. Who knows about the gaskets, but that looks like a high quality gasket, and that's really the way I'd like to torque the head, because it doesn't make any sense, otherwise, but it really does seem like a binding issue, which is not usually a problem. They tell you to reuse the washers, you know, I guess you can buy some head bolts that, have the washers on them. So there might be a little bit of binding that way. You put oil under the threads, it's supposed to prevent it, but next time I might just put anti-seize. But the problem is this: at some manufacturers, they say don't put anything on the bolts. They want it to bind because it may get a false sense of torquing, So, but it wouldn't sound like that. It would just keep sliding, very easy. So, been there, done that, But it needs a little bit of lubrication. That's why I kind of go with the PB Blaster, because it's a good lubricant that's very, very thin, and it should bind at a certain point, and it's really not. And I really feel it's more of all the other conditions I was talking about. So, that being said, this became a longer part of the video, and I'm sweating bullets now. It's hot, and like I can just one last time. See, it's not going now, so that's good. It finds its center, kind of thing, you know. Once it's in it, it's not like the head bolt's not going to break. It's going to break when you torque it or when you loosen it. So I feel I did the right thing, and it needed to equalize at a certain point, So I don't think it's going to be an issue at all.
Alrighty, very well. Next step. Alright, this is several days later. So, all oily around here. This thing is so hard to get off, and a lot of people online are saying that it's hard. I actually got it off a lot, but I used the original bolts, and then I got these longer ones. Unbelievable how much easier that is when you got something correct. And you got to be careful of this, from what I understand. I used that. As you can tell, that was pretty nasty. Definitely leaking. All this crud was getting up here, but ultimately, this, you know, if you buy the original Miller tool for this Dodge, nope, that, yeah. So I used my harmonic balancer puller rod, which is 5/8 18. I got a nut. I drilled out these 5 holes, which I'm just hoping that these bolts didn't get messed up. You know, I just couldn't get them out by hand. Well, that one I couldn't. I guess that's the one I tried to move first. Why is it bloody? Oh, AE lock. All right. All right. One guy's going. Hey. So this was a bushing driver that I have, and it was actually pretty easy to drill through, and I used the pulley as a guide, and it's not perfect, but I made the holes bigger, so they ended up, you know, working out. It's a little hard for me to do, but the machinist machined the nut so it fit perfectly in the hole, so you knew it was in the center, because that's how it was still set up that it would pull, and it just did a beautiful job right now. So happy about that. This guy moves it quite a bit. I was a little surprised at that, but a lot of people mess these up because they have to break them off because they can't get them off. It's very hard. I was trying other things here. This was too big. Ultimately, the right tool has like 5 holes in it, so is what it is. Even the 4-bolt one from the earlier models, actually the original motor should have had it. This is like a newer motor. Now I can finally change this, put this back together, and get this time belt on. At least get it running. Got to get this done. This fucking water pump, and hopefully things will start to get going here. So I didn't want to. I mean, I wanted to make a video, but I forgot because I was really into it. Because I really had to pay attention about the keyway. It had to be all the way flat, and I still reached my finger back there when I was catching it. The seal went in okay, but I had a hard time. The metal ring kept coming out. But once I used this is what I use for transmissions for the lip seals. You wrap it around the crank and around the whole seal, it was boop, right in. Not a problem. So I'm just got to figure out where the marks are because this looks funny. You know, that's the mark on the gear. I don't know if it's this is not quite really a mark here. Unless it's just supposed to go to the outside cover here. No, there's no mark here. I think you're just supposed to line up the 0 on the other side. That's really what it comes down to. I'll double check, but I think that's it. All right, so this sucks. This little bolt, the machine shop gave it back to me. I had it over here, and then, as you can tell, I got it all back together. And that's an oil gallery, so I unscrewed it. Fucking pouring everywhere. And it made a mess all over the floor. And who knows how much oil I wasted. Now I have to buy more oil. How wonderful. And I got a big puddle of oil. Would have been smart if I kicked that thing over at least. I got a massive. Ah, was not expecting that. Hopefully that cardboard sucks it up a little. But I'm not ready to start it just yet. I will be. But basically, I got everything back together. I can't say there was any, issues here. I ended up putting that spacer back for the EGR because there's so many different year parts on this thing. I wasn't quite sure. I think I found one afterwards that probably would have worked. But the one for the 86, it's definitely not an 86, even though I thought it was. So it seems like it's an 86 exhaust manifold with a 91 intake manifold. I'm not 100% sure. So I had already bought, this belt was new, but the power steering belt was older than dirt. I had two different belts because I bought the 86 and then I realized that the other one was really loose. So I was like, I bet you it's a different, belt. So I got the other belt. I read that you can use a PH16 style um, uh, oil filter. So I had one. So I just bought oil. So I'm going to spend an extra $4 on oil. And I lost a lot of oil, unfortunately. But it's just oil. Anyway, I think I'd like to crank it a little bit first. Yeah, I can't believe how I'm surprised it didn't go down in the pan. Like it was, even when I was holding, I held it for like 30 seconds to make sure that it would go down, and it didn't all go down. I guess a decent amount gets held up there. So this is the coil wire, but I want to crank it a little bit first. Let me get this little handy dandy thing the guy put on. Not sure if that's capable of 100 amps, but oh well. Now, I'm not sure if this, see, I changed the thing for that guy because I grounded it, it goes up, but then it doesn't really do anything. And there's this one. Hopefully it pulls something. That evidently got the gas up. I smell gas, so hopefully it's not leaking. I put fuel injecting clamps. They had regular clamps on there. And I'll put this guy back on. And the intermediate, they had the intermediate shaft on wrong because all these motors usually, this is straight across right here. So it's usually not an issue. Oh, Jesus. I broke my glasses. I didn't even realize I stepped on them. Oh, well. I was just saying how my glasses, this is the longest they've ever lasted. My reading glasses. Oh, well. Well, I got a vacuum leak somewhere. Look at that. Oh, I think there's an extra line here that I was not aware of. All right, I'm going to try to sort this out a little bit and fine tune whatever I got to fine tune and add some more oil and take it from there. So, a little bit of vacuum lines, but this guy was totally off. I just wanted to clip it on and do it live and direct. I don't know, still have a problem. It sounds better. It still sounds like it has a miss. Pretty retarded. Oh well, so much for what I thought.
That's the thing about the timing belt. It doesn't matter if it's off a little bit. Whoop, wrong way. I wasn't sure. That's a little better now. I wonder if that oil gauge works. Yeah, the original one works. Oh yeah, that one works now. The other one was bad. So I figured. Already. Alright. So I basically didn't do much. There's a nice amount of blow-by here. I was worried that there was so much blow-by, and that's the reason why it was misfiring. So if I still have a misfire, this was pretty much for naught. But the head had no sealing on it. This guy is leaking a little bit right there. That's more advanced. I didn't really hear the idle change. Why is that so fucking far off? Oh well. If it has some other problem with the ignition system, like the pickup under the coil there. How can it be such a dead spot? The other, it definitely sounds better than it did when I had it running. Last time I ran this engine with the old head. If you go too far retarded, too far advanced, it don't work. I'm going to be upset if it has a bad cylinder still, because there's no evidence of a bad cylinder. He's distributing. I was fucking with the wires on the fucking thing. I should have got a new one. I'm going to let it warm up for now. Also possible some of these vacuum lines are on purpose, but pretty sure I have them on the way I had them. That sounds like it's retarded. So it should go this way. Yeah, that went up. Thing came on and it fucking nearly died. Oh, maybe I gotta have this covered a little bit. That might be part of the problem, is that it actually creates a vacuum leak within itself. It usually doesn't though, just by having it off, but it may help to have that kind of back pressure. I may have to play with a few things, but it actually sounds pretty decent. But there's still something funny about it. Yeah, this seems like a little bit of an ignition thing, but it's not. It's not like it was before. I think the guy mentioned that, because he originally said there was nothing wrong with the valves, but I'm like, rebuild the whole head, man. And then when he did it, he was like, oh yeah, the It seemed to be a little problem, but it was minor. That's why I'm like, how the hell did I only get 60 pounds of pressure? We put oil in the cylinder, it goes up 5 pounds. So it always sounds like it's in the head, you know. So, but I wouldn't think that this is not terribly unusual. Oh, it definitely runs better than it did. Something had to work its way out, apparently. Maybe the lifters weren't pumped up. I think that's maybe what it was. Also low on antifreeze here. This fucking thing. It's a screen on this one. Oh yeah, that's running good now. I told him there was going to be some blow by probably, but a lot of these things probably have blow by. I think it needs more antifreeze for sure. You know it is. Let's not have it overheat. It's barely going up. It's great that the oil pressure works. Okay. They put a whole nother oil pressure gauge in this car instead of fixing it. Can't believe I broke my glasses. All right. Still like a dead spot on acceleration. I don't think I had that before. So of course I don't even have a timing light hooked up to this, and the antifreeze is low, so I'm going to get a reading from the what do you call it? The coolant temperature sensor that says there may be something wrong with that. So, and when you fill it up, I left this out because you're supposed to actually open this to bleed it out, which I may still have to do. But this is the oil. Oh man, what a mess! Oh no, this is mostly the whole vibe. That's an engine that just went blow by. Actually sounds pretty healthy now. The lifters had a pump up. That's really what it was. All right. I think that's a success. I'm just going to top off everything, call this a day. And I got other work to do to the car. I got to do struts and a whole bunch of, some tie rods and whatnot. So I think ultimately it's running pretty good. So, bam. Thanks for watching. All right. So I still have the same 60 pounds. And Jesus. I didn't want it to do that. Anyway, when I crank it, it seems to be a little bit more. When I'm running it, I get only 60 at idle. Watch. Come on. Give me a break. There's something wrong with this tune-up. That and I have a feeling that the lifter holding a mismatched rocker arm that's not right or something like that. I got to ask him now some questions. It's very crazy. That's exactly the way it ran before, where you drive it, it don't feel bad, and I was assuming that the pressure was going up, but it was very odd, but for it to not be leaking on the head gasket, even though all that stuff was bad, I don't think that was the reason, because it was not overheating or anything like that. So I begin to think it's not the lower half, though, mainly because even at this point, you put oil in it, it goes up, but it reaches 120 when you rev it. So that goes to show me it's going so fast that it's building up the pressure, but at idle it bleeds off. So it's got to be the lifter, got to be something weird with that for sure. So unfortunately, this is a big dud. I'm forcing air down the cylinder. I know it's full shop air, but when I put the air in, it did. I basically put the uh, rockers far away, so I don't know if it's exhaust stroke or intake stroke, but looks like that one would go first, and that's an exhaust. So we're on the exhaust stroke, so the piston's on the top. It usually the motor will push down with this much air pressure, and it's just escaping. I have no idea where this air is going because there was no evidence of that. I filled the cylinder with oil, and the cylinder looked clean. And the only thing I can think of is that, you know, the guy had mentioned that the engine was rebuilt, and I'm like, it definitely wasn't rebuilt, but I have a feeling they got some guy to take apart the engine since the oil pan gasket is new and actually installed improperly. It's squeezing out too much, you know, but it looks like the it's possible they dropped the pan and they changed the rings, and there was a crack in the piston somewhere that where it mattered, or they completely forgot to put the rings in, like they put a blank piston in without the rings or something like that. Something stupid. Oh boy, what a waste. Not good. Anyway, actually, I was going to say, this is called the leak down test, where you force air in. You take off the rocker arms, these guys, you push them out, and I feel air coming up through the engine crankcase. If one of the valves were not seating, like if the guy didn't do the valve job right, this one here would leak if it was an intake valve, and I would feel on the back of the car if the exhaust valve was leaking. But it's quite astonishing how it reaches 150 psi when you rev it. I've never had that on a ring without blowing like ridiculous amounts of oil. So something is weird and it's not normal, and I think that somebody messed with it, and that's why it was hard to diagnose. Because when you have a cylinder that has low compression, and then you put it, you know, you go and you check it with the compression test, and then you do a wet compression test, and it only goes up 5 pounds. I'm like, that's not a bad cylinder. That's not a bad, you know, bad set of rings usually. So I'm quite upset because I kind of felt it was funny, and the machinist looked at what I had here between the head gasket being rotted and this not looking good at all. I was, I guess I can shut this off. Yeah, that's not, it's not even making any fucking connection there. It's so funny how it leaks so bad, and then when you rev it, it actually gets some compression. So either they installed them wrong, they broke a piece out of the ring or something like that, but it's somehow not scoring the cylinder wall. I don't know. But this was pretty nasty looking, if you ask me. But it was replaced at one time, so something happened. And this is what happens sometimes when you have projects somebody else touched, and I should have just opted for a used engine. Although I was looking for them, they're far away and they're like $800, and I thought for, you know, half the money in parts it would have been, you know, better. I'm upset, to say the least. So now I put these back in. You can see that's the top. That's how I lined it up. And I put these back in. It never pushed the piston down, and still is air coming out from the crankcase. No air from here and no air from the tailpipe. So I wish I had thought about this, but it's totally not normal. You know, to get a reading like that is completely unnatural and usually associated with the head. So I think next time somebody tells me that they quote unquote rebuilt the engine or anything like that, I got to be careful and you know, just be more thorough. I would never expect this to do a leak down test to a cylinder that has 60 pounds that doesn't go up when you put oil in it. So definitely odd. I really feel, because the cylinder looks so good, like somebody put no rings, they forgot a ring or something along those lines, or there's a huge crack in the piston that you can't see.
at the ring lands. You know, that's the only other thing I can think of. All right, started doing the struts, and I know I said, you know, we got to buy the strut mounts, and I did this strut. You know, no issues. It's missing the lower rubber part, but I just thought maybe it didn't come with it because both of them didn't have it. But apparently, it is a thing. But that's not even a big deal. The top piece there, everything went together good. This side, I took this apart. I have it in the compressor now. This fucking thing is rotted. I've never seen this. But they do sell them new. So we're going to need that. This guy, these bearings are no good. The bushing is, I could tell by looking at it in the car, it was, you know, when it's under load, it was, you know, these are off. But, you know, we got new ones, you know, but we don't got those. And I'll just take that apart. It comes with both the rubber on the end and this thing. It's called spring seat. And that's really bad. It totally deformed because it's so weak now. And I have not seen that. Not yet, at least. This is why the last 10 years, most of the cars have the complete strut. You just buy the whole strut and put it in. You don't fuck around. It comes with everything new. So I wasn't expecting that to be bad, to be honest, but it is, and we're going to need it.